In today's deep dive, we unravel one of the internet's most terrifying mysteries and contrast it with the even darker reality of documented history. We're exploring the Russian sleep experiment, the truth behind its existence, and the modern experiments of 2026 that may be scarier than any urban legend. The story began on a corner of the internet in 2010. It claimed that in the late 1940s, Soviet researchers kept 5 political prisoners awake for 15 days using an experimental gas stimulant. The narrative describes a descent into madness. By day 9, the subjects began screaming until their vocal cords tore. By day 15, they had allegedly mutilated themselves and developed a terrifying, superhuman resistance to sedation. The most famous image associated with the story of why died emaciated creature is actually an animatronic Halloween prop named Spasm. Is it real? No. The Russian sleep experiment is a work of fiction, a creepypasta that went viral because it tapped into real Cold War anxieties. There is no historical record of a gas-based sleep experiment in the USSR that turned men into monsters. However, while this specific story is a myth, the real experiments conducted by nations during that era were far more clinical and far more lethal. If you find the myth scary, the documented case studies are worse because they actually happened. Unit 731 Imperia, Japan, from 1936 to 1945. A covert unit of the Japanese army conducted experiments in Harbin, China, that dwarf any horror movie. The logs. Prisoners were referred to as Maruta logs. The incident. Thousands were subjected to vivisections, dissection while alive without anesthesia, to observe the effects of diseases like the bubonic plague and anthrax. They were also frozen to study frostbite and placed in high-pressure chambers until their bodies failed. The result? Not one of the thousands of prisoners survived. After the war, many of the lead scientists were granted immunity by the US in exchange for their research data. Nazi concentration camp experiments. Germany at Dachau and Auschwitz. Doctors like Joseph Mengele performed medical research that led to the Nuremberg Code. The freezing studies. Prisoners were submerged in vats of ice, water for hours to see how long German pilots could survive in the North Sea. High altitude tests. Subjects were placed in vacuum chambers to simulate falling from 20,000 meters. Their brains were often dissected immediately after death to study air embolisms. Project MKUltra, United States, during the Cold War. The CIA conducted illegal human experiments on US and Canadian citizens to develop mind control and truth serum. The incident. Subjects, often unsuspecting patients or prisoners, were dosed with LSD for 77 days straight, subjected to sensory deprivation, and put into electrosleep, electrically induced comas. Human experiments in 2026. Are these experiments still happening? In 2026. The scary part, isn't necessarily physical torture, it is the invisible and digital nature of modern testing. Human Infection Challenge Studies. HICS. These are real and active today. Healthy volunteers are intentionally infected with pathogens like updated strains of malaria or flu in controlled environments to fast-track vaccines. While ethical, the idea of choosing to be infected is a modern psychological shift. The invisible AI experiments. In 2026, many of the experiments are psychological. Tech giants and governments use it to test mass-scale behavioral modification, seeing how subtle changes in algorithms can influence your sleep patterns, your spending, or even your political leanings. Neural implants. As of 2026, brain-computer interface BCI trials are expanding. We are the first generation experimenting with merging human consciousness with silicon. The risk isn't a gas that keeps you awake. It's a chip that could potentially record your thoughts. The Russian sleep experiment remains a powerful myth because it reminds us of how fragile our minds are without rest. But the true horror lies in our history in the cold. Clinical records of Unit 731 and the secret files of the CIA. As we move further into 2026, the experiments are becoming less about what happens in a lab and more about what happens inside our digital lives and our very biology. What do you think is scarier? The physical experiments of the past or the digital mind-altering experiments of today? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If you want more deep dives into the dark side of history and science, subscribe and hit the bell icon.